Welcome to another episode of The Dissection. How much are South Africans earning? What is the average monthly income? What is the median monthly income? Which number is more reflective of the earnings of the working population? This is what this episode is going to be looking at. And we can get these answers from Statistics South Africa, particularly from the Quarterly Employment Statistics, the QES, which were released this week. To get a fuller picture, though, what we will do is we'll compare that with another data set, the Monthly Earnings in South Africa report of 2017 to 2022, which was also released this year from Statistics South Africa. So, what's the background of the quarterly employment statistics and what do these statistics actually measure? Firstly, the Quarterly Employment Statistics QES is an enterprise-based sample survey which is conducted by Statistics South Africa. The samples are drawn from private, non-agricultural businesses such as factories, firms, offices, and stores, as well as from national, provincial, and local government entities. The definition of industries that is used in this particular dataset is based on the system of national accounts and is in line with the standard industrial classification of all economic activities. So the data is from employment statistics of the following industries. Number 1, mining and quarrying. Number 2, manufacturing. Number 3, electricity, gas, and water supply. Number 4, construction. Number 5, wholesale and retail trade, repair of motor vehicles, motorcycles, and personal and household goods, and hotels and restaurants. So that's quite a big category, number 5. Number 6, transport, storage, and communication. Number 7, financial intermediation, insurance, real estate, and business services. And number 8, community, social, and personal services. So this is where the data is coming from. What do the numbers say? Here we go. Average monthly earnings. The average monthly earnings for the non-agricultural formal sector amounted to 27,450 in the second quarter, and this number was up from 26,783 in the first quarter. So from a quarter perspective, this is an increase of 2.5%. These are impressive numbers. 27,450 average monthly earnings for the non-agricultural formal sector. Year on year, the average monthly earnings were up 4.8% from 26,202 monthly average income in May of 2023. Okay, so face value, these numbers are good, but we need to do something because we need to actually find out what is the real monthly earning as opposed to the nominal monthly earning. I'll explain that just now. Average monthly earnings at constant prices, which are benchmarked at December 2021 by industry, and this is called the real pay. There's a bit of a difference there. When you look at the number using the constant prices, which Stats SA bases on December 2021, the average monthly earnings are a bit lower at 23,807 per month. Right? So why is there a discrepancy? Why is there a difference in this? It all is based on what is known as nominal pay versus real pay. Let me explain. Nominal pay refers to the amount of money an employee earns in current monetary terms without adjusting for inflation or changes in purchasing power. It's the raw figure or value or the face value of the wages or salary received during a given period. Okay? Now, the nominal pay is face value, non-adjusted for inflation. What about real pay? Real pay, in contrast, is adjusted for inflation, and it provides a clearer picture of the actual purchasing power of the wages over time. Real pay reflects what goods and services the nominal pay can buy at any point in time. The reality is there has been inflation, especially if you look at food inflation, energy inflation, fuel inflation. Those prices have gone up. So everybody knows that, the 20,000 that maybe your father said that he earned a month is not the same as the 20,000 you are earning a month, right? Because things have gone up. So you always have to correct for nominal versus real to get a real feel of how things are. It's like real weather, when you get the weather report in some of the apps, they'll tell you feels like, so that you know that it's 20, but it's windy outside, so it feels like 15. So dress like this, okay? So that's what the numbers are saying in respect to the average monthly earnings. Now, earnings by industry, because there's a discrepancy. The averaging doesn't show the full picture. Let's look at the earnings by industry, and this includes bonuses and overtime. Some industries are not able to give the earnings outside of bonuses and overtime. No, they don't want to, because the numbers look far worse when you exclude bonuses and overtime. But give or take, you can subtract a few thousand on these average monthly earnings, and then you'll get a picture of what it is without the bonuses and overtime. I'm going to put this graphic up. So in the mining and quarrying industry, the average monthly earnings, 33,956. In the manufacturing industry, average monthly earnings, 23,614. Okay, so mining is doing better than manufacturing. Electricity, gas, and water supply, that's really where the money is, according to this data, 52,201. Woo, making money in electricity, gas, and water supply. Average monthly earnings, 52,000, right? Construction industry, average monthly earnings, 23,297, right? Wholesale, retail, repair of motor vehicles, personal and household goods, hotel and restaurants industry. It's a very big category. I think they couldn't figure out how to pair this all together. They just put the whole thing in the same place. Okay, so there, the average monthly earnings, 17,771, right? That's the lowest performing in terms of average monthly earnings. Transport, storage, and communication, average monthly earnings, 31,003. Financial intermediation, insurance, real estate, and business services industry, average monthly earnings, 31,951. Community, social, and personal services industry, 31,766. So that gives you an indication of, by industry, how are people earning and how are the salaries performing by industry. Now, let's talk about take-home pay. There's a company, Banker Serve Africa, that has an index where they track the average nominal take-home pay amongst estimated 4 million salary earners in South Africa. The average nominal take-home pay is 16,582, right? So in real terms, that is 14,520. And they're using the data from August 2024, and it's 1.9% higher than it was last year. So this is obviously after tax, after you've paid all your tax obligations. So that's the number, 14,520 in real terms, which is using a baseline of 2021 December, or if you will, 16,582. This is how much the average earner is taking home in South Africa in 2024, right? When you base it on that particular thing, on the nominal pay, right? So let's talk a little bit more about this data at this point. Now that you have the numbers, let's remember some of the limitations around this data. The data only looks at 10,716,000 jobs, which fall into the 8 industries that we discussed before. It does not look at the informal sector. It does not look at the agricultural sector. It does not look at domestic jobs, household jobs, which effectively means that it does not look at the whole picture. We know that there are 16,652,000 people considered employed in South Africa. In the informal sector, you've got 3.1 million people. In the agricultural sector, you've got 896,000 people working there. In private households, you've got 1.1 million people working there. So if you then consider the fact that you're basically missing the data of 5.6 million people in this data, in considering the average monthly earnings, the picture is not complete. So how do you complete the picture? How do you complete the picture? So firstly, you must look at more data sets. And also, we must then appreciate something that is very important to appreciate. Anybody who's done statistics knows that there's a critical difference between an average and a median or a mean, right? I don't want to lecture everybody in terms of basic statistics, but it's important just to bring that information back. And maybe there's like a statistics aspiring student who wants to do stats later in life, or somebody who's just forgotten the basics or whatever. Let's just go over it just for completeness, right? Just for completeness. What is the mean? The mean or average is the sum of all values in a data set divided by the total number of values. So let's say I have three numbers, 2, 2, and 2. The average is 2. How did we get that number? We add 2 plus 2 plus 2, 6 divided by 3, then we get 2. Okay? So that is the average. The median is the middle value set in a data set where the values are arranged in ascending or descending order. So the calculation process, as I've discussed before, is you have, for mean or average, you sum up all the data points and then you divide by the number of data points. The median is determined by ordering the data and finding the middle value, or the average of the two middle values if the data set has an even number of elements, okay? So if you have 4 data sets for your median, you've got 2, 2, 2, and 2. You arrange them, and then if you can see that, okay, we've got 2 middle numbers here, 2 and 2, you add them, you divide them by 2. So the median in my example is the same, right? It's still going to be 2 in this particular set of data, which is just as simple as possible. But there's something that is important to recognize. And before I discuss that sensitivity, let's remember that South Africa is a deeply unequal country, and it has the highest Gini coefficient of inequality at 0.67. It's the most unequal country in the world, meaning that there are discrepancies in the data. For instance, you guys will have heard that the average CEO in South Africa earns 1,000 times more than their employees in a company. That's a discrepancy that can skew data. So now that I've given you the definitions, it's important to recognize that there's sensitivity to outliers. The mean or the average is highly sensitive to outliers or extreme values, right? A few very large or very small numbers can significantly shift the mean. The median is not sensitive to outliers. It depends on the middle value and thus remains unaffected by extreme values. Okay, so let's do a quick calculation. Let me show you. If we have 3 numbers, 2, 4, and 14, for simplicity, right? What is the average in those numbers? The average is, let's see, we've got 20. 20 divided by 3 will give us 6.9 something. Okay? So that is the average if we are talking about the average. But if you think about it, only one person is making most of the income in this situation if this was money. The other guy is making 2, he's making very little. The other guy is making 4, he's making very little. But if we then say what is the average looks quite higher because now we're saying that the average is close to 7. But that's misleading. The data has been skewed. You make that number bigger. Let's keep our 2, let's keep our 4, and now let's give this guy 21. So that we get, let me see, is 21? Yeah, let's use 21. Yes. So if we're using 21, which takes us to 28, 28 divided by 3, what are we now getting? 9. The number is now higher as an average, But the reality is that two people in this data set are still making very low amount of money in the data set. So that's the problem with using mean as. So if you use median, you are more likely to have a correct and accurate representation of a situation. Skewed distributions like South Africa, where there is high inequality and high unemployment or high discrepancies in income, make it such that the average measure is not the most useful measure. In a skewed distribution, the mean or the average is pulled in the direction of the skew, which might not reflect the typical value of the data set. That's why in skewed distributions, what am I saying? Skewed distributions, the median is a better measure of central tendency as it represents the middle point, making it more representative of the data set. Okay? The mean is suitable when all values are of equal importance and there are no extreme values that distort the average. For instance, a CEO making 69 million and 69 million in bonuses, etc., like the Vodacom CEO, while the average person who works in the Vodacom shop is not making that, right? So when you have these extreme distributions, you shouldn't use average. You should use median. Median is suitable when there are outliers, skewed distributions, or where one is interested in finding the middle of the data set rather than its total sum. The mean is not the right measure for a full picture. So, where do we get good mean data? We get that data from the quarterly labor force survey, which also looks at income, right? So let me give you some background. Remember, I said at the beginning that there are two data sets that we're going to look at. Which data sets did I say we're going to look at? I said we're going to look at the monthly earnings in South Africa 2017 to 2022 data from Stats SA, which we're also now contrasting with the quarterly employment statistics which have been released. So now, how does Stats SA get this data? The median data. Data collected from this report is basically from the quarterly labor force survey, which is a household-based sample survey conducted by Stats South Africa. Stats SA collects data on the labor market activities of individuals aged 15 years of age and above who live in South Africa, and the report only covers the market activities of persons aged 15 to 64. Stats SA has introduced earnings questions to the quarterly labor force survey questionnaire from the third quarter of 2009. So they've collected this data for a significant period of time, right? So what does that data say? In 2017, there were approximately 16.1 million employed persons who were working for pay or profit, right? 13 million were employees, 1.6 million were known as own account workers, and 846,000 were employers. So that gives you a fuller picture, I think. 84%, 13 million employees, 10.5% or 1.6 million own account workers, and 846,000 or 5.5% were employers, right? So 15% in employer or own account working, and then 84% as employees. Own account workers are individuals who are self-employed and operate their own businesses without continuously employing others. They may work alone or with partners, but they do not have any employees on a regular basis. This classification is significant in labor statistics and is defined by various organizations, including the International Labor Organization, ILO, right? So medians, as I've discussed before, measures that best describe the distributions of earnings, and they are more stable over time. The median earnings more accurately represent actual earnings in occupation, right? So the analysis of the earnings reveals various interesting things. It reveals gender pay gaps. It reveals also racial pay gaps. And now we're going to look at just some small slices of the data. I recommend that you go and look at this data in full from the Stats SA website, where they've got the various data sets. We all need to play more with data. Right, let's look at this particular one. Median monthly earnings of employees. Right, here's what it says. Men, 7.5 million men employed, women 6.2 million employed. The bottom 5% is making 1,000 Rand per month, bottom 5%. The bottom 10% for men is making 1.7 thousand a month. The bottom 25% is making 3,000 a month. The median is making 5,000 a month for men. For women, the median is 3,800. I'm putting the data up on the screen so that you can keep your eyes on it. Okay? And then also just think about what it means for you. So that's the median income in terms of men, women. In 2017, it was 4.5. And in 2022, it was 5.4, 5,417. Now let's look at the top 25%. The top 25%, right, is making 15,000 a month. The top 10% is making 26,000 a month. The top 5% is making 35,000 a month in 2022. Can you see that data? Yeah. So that's an interesting data set. Let's look at median monthly earnings by population group. I'm just going to look at the 2022 data. And if you look at this median monthly earnings by population group, Black Africans, 4,684. Coloreds, 5,000 rands. Indian or Asian, 15,000 rand a month. White South African, making 21,000 a month. The total, 5,417 median income. So you can see that there are big gaps there. Let's look at the median monthly earnings by age, right? When you look at it by age, 15 to 24, 4,300. 25 to 35, we've got 5,000 rands. 35 to 44, 5,670. 45 to 54, 6,000 rands. And when you look at the 55 to 64 age group, 7,500. So basically in 2022, the white population group had the highest median earnings, followed by Indians and Asians. The median monthly earnings for the white population group significantly higher than if you look at it, for instance, the black population group, 21,000 versus 4,684. So you can see that there are some discrepancies which are quite vast when you look at it from that perspective. Let's look at monthly earnings for employees by occupation. Right. So occupation and sex. Let's look at that. So now managers. What's happening with managers there? For men, what am I looking at? Okay, I was looking at the wrong column. Now let's look at managers more specifically. Men. So I said managers, but I actually meant just the total at the beginning. So now looking at managers' median monthly earnings, right? Managers, 25,000 rands per month for men, 18,000 rands a month for women. Discrepancy women to earning ratio, 0.7%. Look at professionals. Professionals, men, 26,000 rand a month, women, 21,000. Ratio 0.8. Right. Look at technician. 17,000 rands a month for men, 18,000 rand a month for women. So in this one, women are slightly doing better off. The ratio is 1.06. Now we go to the next category, which is clerk, with a misspelled clerk, but story for another day. Men, 8,000 rands, women, 6,800. Looking at sales and services, 5,500 for men and 4,000 for women. Skilled agriculture, 4,000 for men, 4,000 for women. There's parity in the agricultural sector. Craft and related trade, 6,000 for men, 4,900 for women. Discrepancy, right? Plant and machine operator. There should be no discrepancy, but there is. Look at this. 6,000 for men, 5,000 for women. Ratio is 0.83. Elementary work, 3,792 for men and 3,500 for women. So elementary work, I've discussed these types of things before. It's stuff like, security work, those people pushing trolleys, those kind of stuff. It's basically low skill work where you don't need to have a matric. Grade 10 or less will cover you. Grade 9, basically. Domestic worker, we've got median monthly earnings, 2,000 rands for men, 2,400 for women. So women domestic workers make more. So look at that. That's quite an interesting data set, if you will, there in terms of the earnings by occupation. Let's look at this one here. Distribution of monthly earnings for employees by population group and sex. So there's quite a lot. So I'm going to direct your attention to the last column there, which is 2022. So if you look at the far right, you'll see 2022 there. And if you look at that, you'll see that Black African women are making a median monthly income of 4,000, and Black African men are making 4,684. And you can continue to look at that data. You'll see that with I actually said the wrong thing. Black African men are making 5,000 median. Black African women are making 4,000 median. Then if you look at white men are making 25,000. White women are making 18,000. White women, this is something you need to complain about right there. That's a discrepancy as well that you should be concerned about. There's still a lot of stuff happening in terms of gender as well as in terms of race in South Africa that tracks the historic data. Right. So basically what the data is telling us from this data set between 2017 and 2022, the total median monthly earnings increased by 800 rands from 4,400 to 5,200. The median monthly earnings for men have generally been higher than women. The median monthly earnings for the white population group was 21,000, while it was 15,000 for Indians and Asians, 5,000 for coloreds, 4,684 for Black Africans. Professionals, managers, and technicians had a median monthly earning of 24,000, 22,000, and 18,000 respectively. Something that's interesting from the data as well, Gauteng is the only province that recorded median monthly earnings above the national average over the period of 2017 to 2022. Cape Town, Western Cape. There's some data for you that is not in line with your narrative. The Western Cape is better. Not for earnings. It's not my words. It's not me saying it. It's Stats SA saying it. In 2022, those working more than 35 hours had median monthly earnings of 6,000 rands compared to their counterparts who worked fewer than 35 hours. Overall, women's median monthly earnings, 4,800, were approximately 80% of the 6,000 median monthly earnings earned by men. Big discrepancy there as well that needs to be addressed. So this is what the data says. So we've done a comparative analysis of the earnings data now. We looked at it from the quarterly employment survey, which gave us a partial picture and focused on the average. Then we looked at the median, which gave us another picture. But before we even finish this conversation, there are two elephants in the room when you're thinking about how much a South African's making. Elephant number one, this data is only looking at this data is looking at only a part of the picture. Both of the data sets, there are 16.65 million people who are employed. 16.65, right? Whether it's in the formal sector, domestic, agricultural, informal sector, 16.65. in a population of 62 million people. That's a big discrepancy. And we mustn't forget that. It's a big discrepancy. We mustn't forget that unemployment right now on the expanded definition is sitting at 42.6%. That's significant. We mustn't forget that when you look at the age group of 15 to 24, unemployment is at 70.6%. And there are about 10 million people in that age group of 15 to 24. 70.6%. But some of them in that age group, you may be thinking they're going to school still, because 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, still in high school. Some of them are in university, right? So that picture is not giving the full picture because some of them are still in school. But when you look at 25 to 34, that gives you another indication of the extent of the crisis. 50.1% unemployed on the expanded definition. 10 million people in that age group. Right? 50.1. 1 out of 2 are not employed. So when we're looking at earnings data, we mustn't forget this. Even when we look at the women between the ages of 15 to 64 have a higher unemployment rate than men at 46.1. There are 20.8 million women between the ages of 15 to 64, which is the working age population. And 46.1% unemployment is 6.6 higher than the unemployment for men, which is sitting at 39.5%. So the unemployment data is something that we must not forget, because while there are 16.5 million people getting some money, the reality is there's a lot of people who are getting no money or very little at all on a monthly basis. And that's something that we should never forget. That is the biggest elephant in the room. The other elephant, when you have two big elephants in a room, you're in trouble. One is a big enough problem, but two is very significant. The other big elephant in the room is that there's a poverty crisis in South Africa, a massive poverty crisis. As of 2023, approximately 18.2 million people in South Africa are living in extreme poverty, defined as living on less than $1.90 a day, which is 32 rands per day using the current rate. That's not good, right? That's the reality. In terms of overall poverty rates, about 57% of individuals in South Africa were reported to be living below the national poverty line. 60% basically. 57. It's high. Child poverty. This is scary, scary stuff. Child poverty is particularly alarming. Around 62.1% of children in South Africa are living in poverty. 62.1%. So the picture is obviously one which is very fragmented. And, there's a book called How to Lie with Statistics or something like that. Depending on what you focus on, you can come out with a very different story, depending on what you focus on. If you say, and I saw some media houses just focusing on this side, saying the average monthly earnings in South Africa were 27,000 rands, 450. That's all. That's where we're focusing. And it's up. It's up by 2.5%. It's great. Everything is good. Yes, it's true. If you work in the formal sector and you're on the right side of that equation of average, remember, there's skewed distribution. Some people are making significantly less. Some people are making significantly more in a particular industry or sector. Vodacom CEO makes 1,000 times more than the average worker in his own company. So depending on where you land, that picture can be very, very good. Even some people, some engineers, some lawyers, some doctors, 27,450. That's nothing to them. That's nothing to them. They buy cell phones with that money, right? So if you just focus on one number, you can get a misleading representation of everything that is happening in South Africa. Because the reality is the picture is quite complex. And we have to think about the picture in its fullness to really have an honest conversation. We can't ignore the informal sector. We can't ignore the agricultural sector. We can't ignore private households. A lot of people are working in those spaces and places. 5.6 million. It's a lot of people. We can't ignore the unemployed. Because when you are trying to think about policy, when you're trying to think about economic direction, you can't ignore that data set as well. It's part of the story. It's part of the story. And we have to acknowledge all parts of the story if we are going to have a real conversation about the state of the economy at any given moment. So when we have these statistical conversations, try to make sure that you are appreciating the differences between the mean, the differences between the median, the differences between even the mode, and how different statistics are used by different entities to tell different stories to different parts of the country and the world. But if you want to have a real understanding, always make sure that you are looking comparatively and holistically at a data set. Otherwise, you walk away either very optimistic or very depressed. It's very clear that middle class South Africa is doing well, even with these numbers. Middle class South Africa will typically be in that manager, professional, technician bracket of the employment data, doing very well. But it's also very clear that working class South Africa, if you will, is not doing so well. It's very clear that the elites are doing very well, right? Senior managers, owners, employers, they're doing very well. But the picture has to be cognizant of everybody so that we can think about how do we fix things. I wonder, what shocked you the most from this particular data? Which data set did you look at and think that, no, man, I didn't realize that this thing is like this, or that thing is like this, or this thing is like this? Let's have a conversation in the comment section. I'm curious to hear what did you think? What surprised you? What was revelatory for you? What part of this analysis did you enjoy, or the dissection did you enjoy the most? Let's have a conversation. I'm keen to hear your thoughts and reflections as well as we think about this big topic of the average and monthly income in South Africa. Till the next one.